everyone, thanks for tuning in. I've posted several time-lapse videos of my work, and it's always kind of bugged me because I think it's a little misleading how quickly I can make a piece. So I decided to do a long video where I don't do any time-lapse, just to kind of put things in perspective. So I'll also just be narrating and talking a lot about how I made my decisions throughout the piece. And as a point of interest, I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but this piece sold within the first, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes that I posted it online. And it definitely is one of those pieces where a lot of people had very positive responses. So it may be of interest to artists who are making art and like wondering, how do I make make a piece of art that sells? I don't know if I'll have the answers here, but I do think it's interesting and important to know that this piece sold very quickly when I posted it. So I hope you enjoy, and if you do, please like and subscribe to this channel, and I hope to see you again. So I'm going to start with my little area that I work in. I have a notebook for keeping notes while I work. This is my little essentials pen case. I have that pretty much every time I work, sitting next to me. It's mostly just got pens in it. These four things are my scrap paper and my little multi-purpose tool. This is the image I'll be working with for collage. And then my template and my X-Acto cutter mat. So I'm just gonna move this stuff sort of out of my way, and I'm gonna start with the collage cutting. I selected this figure because she is fully exposed, like no other figure is cutting into her. So that's like ideal if you want to do a collage in which the subject is not being mixed with other pieces of, paper. Like this, I actually like this person's look more because their face is, visible versus this one, which is cut, but their umbrella is blocked just ever so slightly, so it wouldn't look as, complete as this one. I'm also going to change my blade. I still have the same impulses of when I was in my 20s making art, which is using an X-Acto blade until it's too late. Thinking I'm going to be saving some money, but I have to fight that impulse because it's way more valuable to just change a blade. It's worth the money, as opposed to ruining this unique piece of paper that is old and I won't find again unless I, scour the world and, pay for it on eBay or something like that. Her gesture is really beautiful. She's got her hand kind of like this, which is
I hadn't realized until just now when I was trying to cut it. It's a little more difficult to cut, but it's a lot more interesting of a gesture than just like her hand to the side or something. I've said this before, but I think that patience is like one of the most valuable tools that an artist has. It's so important to, before you make a move of any sort, to just look at what you're about to do. Just anticipate what might happen before you do it. And I don't always do this, but it just makes, that old adage, measure twice, cut once. Taking the measure of what you're about to do is invaluable, especially when dealing again with like a unique object that you can't get again. But even when it's not something like that, if you mess up your own work, it's lost time, not just a lost object. And that's valuable too. And the older I get, the more aware I am of that, for sure. Sometimes with these old images, when the fidelity is like questionable, sometimes you can't tell where one object ends and the other begins. But I suppose the upside of that is no one else can either. So if you decide to interpret it in a certain way, who's really there to challenge you and your interpretation? Except maybe the original photographer or something, if they're still alive. So now I'm going to take my 5 and just kind of clean up the edges. Especially where any like really obvious contrasty white is coming through. Although for this particular piece, it's not really even that necessary that I do this because it's going to be on white paper, so it's not even going to show against the white. It's just a habit I've gotten into more than anything. Alright, so she's done. So, chosen this larger paper because of the composition I'm going to do. This is really probably my favorite paper I've worked with for what I do, because the grain is so fine that lines show up perfectly, but it takes watercolor really well too. Textured paper just doesn't work for me that well, at least in this body of work. So something I sometimes do with this kind of paper is, you see these edges, they're like, they've got like the glue or whatever, the adhesive for keep it in the book. Sometimes I like actually cut off the edges, but I'm not going to do that for this piece. just because it's large. So this is going to be the general composition. What I'm going to do is do like a partial of this, have the bottom coming off, and then it falling apart, and she'll be like, you know, standing under it with like some on here and some like in a pile next to her. So I'm just kind of lining things up. You know, just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna just use I'm gonna eyeball the edges, but I'm going to just line it up against here. And from a composition standpoint, I think that's fair. Maybe I'll put her right here. And I think, just so I remember, I'm going to lightly pencil in her location. Works. You know, I've been asked before if I use a template or if I use a computer and all that stuff. And obviously, yes, I use a template, and I used a computer to create this one. But I am capable of making this shape from scratch using a ruler, a compass, and a protractor. And when I first started, I did that for a little while, and then I eliminated the protractor and I made like a circular gauge, but I used a ruler to extend them out to the edges. And it was just so time consuming, and it didn't seem like it served a purpose in terms of what I was trying to do with my art. Like, my work is not about building it by hand. It's more about what I do with the template, not the fact that I can create it from scratch. You know, maybe one day I will do a video where I make it from scratch. That might be fun because it's been such a long time since I've done it. But you know, for the most part, it just doesn't serve a huge purpose for me in my daily practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just create some sort of end point where this is going to be cut off. And I've learned that I really like when it sort of curves inwardly. I'm not really sure if that's the right idea with this. I think I'm gonna just do, yeah, let's do it. So I'm gonna make a make it too symmetrical. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Is that right? So this one is facing the wrong way. So what I really want is for it to go like now, what I typically do is just start from here and work my way around. Although I have found lately that doing these parts first is almost kind of like a better way. So maybe I'll do that. So I'm going to just start with So, common term that I think about when I do work like this is the word parallax. And no, I'm not talking about the Hal Jordan DC comic book supervillain guy. I'm talking about the optical occurrence when so the ruler is not touching this point. It is a little bit further away because the pen needs to reach the point. And if I'm right here, I can't see the where the pen's going to be. I have to be directly over. So that's parallax. It's like when your perception of something is skewed by your point of angle of view. So it's something that you have to really account for a lot in this work, and after a while it becomes sort of second nature and you don't think about it. But it also is kind of like the biggest giveaway about the fact that this is done by hand, because this point is not a perfect point. It will inevitably have different sort of intersections from where it, where the lines terminate, which to me is part of what makes looking at my work interesting for me, because you could kind of see the limitations of being human, as opposed to if I were to just use, say, Adobe Illustrator to make all my work, when every single line would be perfectly placed. It would be quite boring. So I remember learning about parallax for the first time in chemistry class. And it was specifically about reading the amount of liquid in a say like, what are these? I don't want to spill on myself, but when you look from above at a liquid in a container, it looks like it's at a certain height, and then if you change your perspective, it looks like it's at a different height. And that was the first time I learned about parallax. But the same applies with non-liquids, I think. I'm pretty sure. I think it's just about the angle at which you are observing something and how that affects your perception of how much of something that you're looking at, if that makes sense. I am not a scientist. But I do like science, and I like scientists, and admire them. I guess I could kind of consider this work I do to be somewhat scientific, because a lot of times I am considering outcomes in much the same way that a scientist considers, like, makes hypotheses, like, what would happen if I do this? And then sometimes the hypothesis is correct, and sometimes it is not. And the only way I find out is if I do the experiment. And sometimes I do the experiment wrong, and that leads to other discoveries, much like a lot of scientific discovery. So I changed my mind. I'm a scientist. No, I'm kidding. Mostly. Oh, I forgot that I should be including some longer threads out of this. Although I guess at this point it's not important because I'm kind of creating the boundary. But a lot of these lines will be a little bit longer when I get to those lines. Okay, so that's my boundary basically. So now everything else that I do will just be basically, you know, using that as a guide, but as a loose guide. So I'm going to go back to how I usually work, which is just to start from the top and then work my way around counterclockwise. I just find that to be it's especially important to work this way when I'm doing work with gel pen, because the gel pen does not dry as quickly as ink does. So basically what happens is if I do all of this point here is like the wettest part. So if I move to this one here, I'm not anywhere near that part as I move, you know. Even at the very end, my last line here doesn't actually touch this. So that's kind of why I developed this. Even when I'm not using gel pen, I work in this direction because it's just a habit now, and I just think it's best to maintain the habit in case I, you know, fall out of it and I'm doing a gel piece and I ruin it because I've smeared it.
I wish to be so much better. I wish to be me.